She likes to be in the television as much as she can.
What's life on the vineyard like for your dog?
Well, she likes to be with me. So the only competition that I really have is the swimming pool, because I've got a pool, and she likes it when people throw the ball in the water, and she likes to jump in and get the ball and go and get out of the pool. So whenever anybody has a swimming pool, we go for it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, first, let's talk about.
In fact, we have pools brought to us.
Yeah. We should get a pool here on stage.
The plastic ones work too.
Yeah. Does she come out on stage with you guys when you're?
You know, she won't have it any other way.
Yeah. Very good. She wound up in your blogs. I've seen some of these blogs.
You have.
That you've done, which are really cool. I don't think I've seen her in a blog.
You haven't?
I mean, I haven't seen enough of them. I don't know.
Well, you better do your homework.
I will. All right, so let's talk about the real reason that we're talking here today. This is such an amazing new record, and it's great for so many reasons. Talk about, first of all, just how excited you are and how proud you are to have something new like this coming out this week.
I am thrilled to be putting out another album, and especially this album, which is it's a recollection in a way of songs that I've written in the past, and how I'm re-examining them. The cover is me looking through a magnifying glass at and it really is at my past. I'm looking into the past through, not so darkly, but and the concept of the album sort of came at a time where there was upheaval in my life, and I didn't quite know what I was going to be doing, and I was sort of down about something, and so my son said, "Come on, Mom, let's just sit down. We have all these musicians around the house. Let's just sit down and get together and pick up guitars and the piano, and let's just get back to some of your old songs. I want to see how you wrote them. Let's just see what we can do with them." And so it happened that David Saw was living with us, and Larry Chauncey came. I can't remember if he was living with us right at that time or whether he flew in for the downbeat, and T. Skoll, who I've been playing piano with for years, was there. Peter Kalo came up, and it was a sort of a family affair, and it was all originally on one microphone in the center of the room, which was my bad idea, because I thought somehow we could get a really just, let's gather around the mic, let's gather around the fireplace and sing folk songs. And so what happened was that there was not, if one person made a mistake, we would have to start all over again. There wasn't enough separation in sound. One thing was bleeding into another. The piano wasn't operating really. It was a kind of a boomy situation with the piano. Every time Teese would put his foot on the pedal, it would pound and reverberate in the whole house. And so Ben said, "No, we've got to, we have to separate the instruments." So we did, separate them. Our idea was to do the whole album acoustically, and which we sort of manifested, with the exception of 2 tracks, I think, which have drums on them. But acoustically doesn't mean without rhythm. It just means without a drum, traps, as the drummers like to call them. But Larry Chauncey is a drummer of all different varieties, and so he had a djembe and bongos. We had the opportunity to play as many instruments as we wanted, as long as they weren't actually drums. I mean, we could play the congas, and we could play the what is it called? Not the djembe, but what is it? The cajon.
And it all sounds great. Those things pop in unexpected places, and it just sounds wonderful on the record. But if not literally, you're talking about that campfire feel. Maybe figuratively, did it have that feel still putting this album together? Was that the vibe you wanted still there, being put into words, that feeling of making the record?
That's how it originated, and it was just going to be a very informal, all acoustic album that we were going to make in a week, and really on the cheap, and just with us and nobody else. And I but I called Frank about it. Frank Filippetti is my very often producer and engineer, and he said, "Hey, I want to be there for the downbeat." And so he came up, he flew up to the vineyard, and we put up recording equipment upstairs, and there were wires all over the stairways and downstairs into the living room, and people were snoozing on the couch when they weren't playing, and it was quite a scene. It was quite a wonderful scene. So that's what the original concept of it was. And then as time passed, and Ben and David and Larry went on tour, and I was left with recording devices that I didn't understand, and so it sort of gradually changed to being the concept of whatever works best with this song is what we're going to use, and is what we're going to create. And I think that's kind of what it turned out to be, because certainly You Belong to Me, which was a kind of a smoky pop R&B song of the late 70s, turned into much more of a hip hop song, because we added electric bass and we added drums to that, and we added John Forte. I mean, I asked John Forte, my godson and my dear friend who was in prison for 7 years. He had a sentence of 14 years, but fortunately President Bush commuted him after his 7th year in jail. And I asked John if he would produce a song on the album, and I asked him what his choice would be, and he said, "You Belong to Me." And so he began the production of that and came up with a great record. And Ben was kind of jealous that John was doing it, and so Ben said, "Hey, I want to get in here on the production too." And so Ben Taylor, my son, added his very strong contribution to that. And Ben Taylor's contribution and production throughout the album is quite amazing. I mean, he really put on his production cap, and he did almost all the background vocals. He and I did just about all, I would say 90% of the background vocals on the album. There are some wonderful cameo appearances by our friends Margaret Bell and Meredith Sheldon and Vespa. That is Julia Castellino. Did I pronounce her name right?
I think so, yeah.
Julia Castellina. I sometimes get it confused with Castellino, but in fact it's Castellina. And is it Castellina? Vespa, don't kill me.
But talk about your relationship with Ben, because you mentioned Ben. How hard was it for him to convince you to do this? Was it right away, this is a great idea? Or talk about how the two of you worked together and what he needed to do to get you to want to do this, just that dynamic. Was it an instant process?
Ben's way of operating with me is, he never flatters me. I very often work with somebody flattering me a lot and saying, you're the best, you should really be doing this, you should really show these songs. I mean, he could have done that, but it was a little bit more passive-aggressive than that. But whatever it is, it worked. Ben and I have a unique relationship, which is one that's based on profound respect and huge heart chakra opening love. We just really get along fantastically, and very often it would be that we would just, because we have a lot of old guitars around the house, and because David Saw was living there, very often David and Ben would just be fooling around, as they were one morning with You're So Vain, with an introduction that I never would have imagined would have been on You're So Vain. And so they just started to play it, and they said, "Here, sing it. This is the introduction, now it's your part." So I added a dum, just what I recognized with myself playing on the guitar, even though I wrote that song on the piano. But I played a rhythm part on the guitar and started singing it. And what emerged is a very, I think, different version of You're So Vain. It doesn't have any acoustic piano the way I had written it, with that big dum, bum, bum, that opening, and it doesn't have any guitar solo. big electric guitar solo, and it has no drums. So it's a different and new and still very funky version of You're So Vain. And so and that happened also with Let the River Run. There was, I always begin stories as if they were fairy tales. But one morning I walked downstairs and there were David and Ben and they were sitting and playing this beautiful version of Let the River Run, very acoustic and glassy, and we figured out the key, and then we all started singing it. And it was really very much a three-part harmony song between David, Ben, and myself. And I remember we went down. We had a wonderful holiday. We got invited to a friend's house down in Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic, and we were playing it there for anybody who would listen. And there were some very attractive audiences that came into the house from next door, from where they were staying in their house next door. And we just had a lot of variable audiences coming in and listening, and we developed this beautiful harmony at the end. So the song really changes. We were lucky enough to be able to sing it at Ground Zero on 9/11. We sang that version of Let the River Run. David was in England, and so my daughter Sally sang it with us, which was, Sally, Ben, and I get to sing a lot together, and it's a very natural, familial union that the three of us have.
When you revisit these songs like You're So Vain and Let the River Run and Anticipation, all these songs that mean so much to you, meant so much to you for years, with the new music now, putting them out again, what kind of things go through your head when you're singing? Does it feel the same? Is it different? What's going on inside Carly when you're singing these songs that have been with you for a long time?
It's interesting because I'm not a touring artist. I mean, I rarely tour. And so I don't get to over-sing or over-perform these songs. So when you say that have been with me all these years, it's almost a shock when I happen to turn on the radio and hear You're So Vain or Anticipation. So I'm not that used to those songs. However, in re-recording them, I did find that there was a almost not so subtle difference, especially with Anticipation. The original version of Anticipation, I was clearly imitating Cat Stevens, with whom I was madly in love at the time, and I was opening his shows for him, and when I sing These Are the Good Old Days, that was my ironic twist of the time. It didn't have the sort of real heartfelt I don't know, somehow push of the heart of the heart, or pulling of the heartstrings that it does now when I think These Are the Good Old Days, because there aren't, when you look at the hourglass, it's not quite so full on the other side as it is on the side of life already lived. Although you never know with modern science what they're going to do. I know I'm going to have to live until I'm 190. It's going to be my curse and my blessing. Perhaps I'll get to see something done about this planet so that it's not going to become a watery wonder. I mean, I hope to live to be able to do all sorts of things that will help the world, or to join forces with those that are helping them, and in all areas. And I mean, I've got many areas of political activity or humanitarian activity I mean, if I hadn't done this album, and let's just say for now, without going into details, that I pretty much had to do this album. I didn't really have, I did have a choice, but it was very clear cut that I was going to do this album, and that it became a better and better and better idea to do it. Excuse me. But I think that if what I wanted to do, if I hadn't done the album, what I would have liked to have done if I had been able to have the resources, the mental and physical and emotional and financial and resources to be able to retire, I would have liked to have gone back to, or I would have liked to have gone to music school. I've never been to music school. The music school, I could put on my little outfit to go to music school. A little French music school, maybe in Canada. Do you have one in there in Canada that I could go to? Anyway, I'm sure there are many. And I want to be able to write a symphony before I die. I want to know enough about writing for every instrument and writing, I want to know everything I can get my hands on, because since I've never been a studied musician, that's the one thing I really miss now. I'm not sorry that I didn't do it in the past, because I did lots of other things in the past. And with my childhood growing up, I didn't study piano, I didn't study voice, I didn't study guitar. Those were all self-taught. And in a way, I think that a lot of my generation are that way. Paul McCartney is not, is self-taught. Mm-hmm. James Taylor is self-taught. Cat Stevens is self-taught. These people didn't go like. And the point I wanted to make is that most of the singers that you will hear on American Idol, and the singers who are, I don't know, there's a certain kind of singer you can tell is very, has taken a lot of singing lessons from the time that they were 3 and 4, which I envy tremendously, because they can do all sorts of things with their voices and their hands on instruments that I can't do. But the one thing that our generation that didn't do that has as a plus is a sound that is like nobody else's sound. Mm-hmm. Somehow, if you go and you study, it evens a lot of the idiosyncrasies out. Mm-hmm. Just takes them right out of the game, and you start sounding like everybody else.
Does that make it harder for you to appreciate today's pop stars? How much of that do you follow? How much?
It makes me harder to identify them, because they sound more alike. I like to be able to turn on the radio, if we're thinking radios now, or the internet or iTunes, and be able to, oh yes, and know who it is right away. That makes me feel much more familiar with, it makes me care more about what the words are going to be that are going to come out of their mouths, or the music that I'm going to hear, especially if it's the composer as well as the singer.
Mm-hmm. Is there an artist recently, though, that has that for you, that's done that for you, that's turned you on in that way, like some of your contemporaries?
Well, let's keep it under the same roof. My son Ben Taylor is convincing a songwriter and a voice. People say he sounds like his father, or some people say that he sounds like his father. And yes, there is a family resemblance. And I find that especially where it's the commissure, it's the special imbrication of one part of the skull over the part of the jaw, and where the tongue is connected in the back. There seems to be a Taylor similarity, because a lot of James's siblings have that same thing. And Ben does pronounce words very much the same way that James does, but he also has such a distinct sound, and if you miss that, you're missing something very important, because he's a significant voice for me. And as a writer, he's probably the best writer. I just don't think I've ever heard anybody quite as original and as interesting as Ben is as a writer, and now as a producer. Mm-hmm. So you have to look for his album, which is going to come out very, very shortly, and on Iris Records, which is the same company that I'm putting my record out on, because I believe in my boys, Larry and Ben. Another voice that I love, keeping it all at home, is John Forte, who has a new album out, and he has a voice that you can't miss anywhere. He sang with the Fugees for a while, but he has a voice. He was rapping when I first met him. He was a rapper or a verse teller or whatever he would want you to say he was. But I asked him to put notes to it, and he said, "Mama, I can't sing." He calls me Mama C. And I said, well, just try it. And so I just said, say ah, and so he started to sing. And then while he was incarcerated, I think he sang a good deal, and he is now quite the melodist as well as the rhythmicist. What is it, Larry?
I don't know what the proper word would be. Rhythmicist.
Ebonics
You can create it.
contender. He's as well as a, he's partial to his rhythms, let's just say that.
You mentioned American Idol. Before I forget, I just wanted to ask you about, you sang a version of You're Sylvain for Simon, or you said the song was about him?
Yes, I was, no, I was so flattered. I was asked to be the surprise guest at his birthday party this year in London, this summer, July 29th, I believe. And I couldn't make it over there, unfortunately. And so it was put together by Piers Morgan, and Piers called me up and asked me whether I would, because he and two other people were going to be singing it, all dressed up in like sort of in Simon Cowell. Is it Cowell or Cowell wigs? I'm going to just start that over.
Sure.
They were all dressed up in Simon Cowell wigs, and they were going to sing "You're So Vain" for him. That was going to be the grand finale. So they asked. So Piers asked me if I would call and wish him a happy birthday and tell him that the song was written about him, which I couldn't, in all honesty, do. But I did say that it's in its current incarnation, meaning that night, it was about him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really quite a character and somebody that I would very much like to meet.
Mm-hmm. You haven't had a response since? Or?
Oh no, he called me the next day and thanked me so much. In fact, he got on the phone that night. I mean, I spoke to him that night while the show was being.
Okay.
It wasn't a show that was being taped. It was a private party, but I'm sure that it was taped for the party.
Mm-hmm.
And so there, it was taped me wishing him a happy birthday.
Mm-hmm. There's such great, wonderful mystery, obviously, with that song that the whole world's still fascinated with. What's it like for having redone the song now? Does it take on a whole new meaning? Is it the same meaning it had for you when you wrote the song?
Let's face it, the whole world is not fascinated by who that song is. There are people in Bangladesh who are much more interested in getting above the water. The water has
the
just.
silly pop world.
I'm sorry to bring that into
Well,
it.
that's more important in some ways. Well, we're talking about good music, though, the music world.
Is interested in who that's about.
It's something that still comes up, obviously, when people talk to
I don't know who it's about. I don't know.
Isn't it time? It's a wonderful fall day. You have a new album. Just kind of let it be out there.
Well, it's certainly about me today because I'm very concerned about these big bags under my eyes because I have this cold and I'm retaining water, and sometimes I do anyway, even when I don't have a cold because I'm ugly.
That's not true.
Fake out.
When
Psych.
When you sing a song like that, or any of you, we touched on this before. When you sing these songs now, though, just kind of the good old days you mentioned. Just that emotion that comes up. Is the same emotion there for you now? Is it a new emotion? Just if you can put the words again, what kind of things go through your head when you're reliving some of those moments? Maybe because you see they haven't lived with you for so long, but when you're touching on them again for the first time in 12 years, 15 years, whatever it was you last did a few shows, or.
Well, one of the songs that has had the most profound change for me is "Boys in the Trees." "Boys in the Trees" was never a hit. It was the title of the album that "You Belong to Me" was on. But "Boys in the Trees" is about me when I was growing up and being in the attic apartment of, in my old narrow bed, and looking out the window and seeing the boys in the trees, which was a sort of a metaphor for the fact that the boys were growing up, and how was I going to be in relation to the boys? And so it's the age-old question of do you go to them or do you let them come to you? Or does there have to be a Sadie Hawkins dance for you to be able to be legally able to pick them for the dance? Sorry, my voice is getting really scratchy. Yeah, I think I need a little bit of that. I think the Gatorade would be great. So, "Boys in the Trees."
And your daughter's on that.
Well, that's what I was going
Yeah.
to tell you. The meaning of "Boys in the Trees" initially when I wrote it was about all the messages that my mother had passed on down to me. My mother being a daughter herself, a daughter of her mother. Get it? So the silent understandings passing down from daughter to daughter, "Let the boys grow in the trees," is the refrain of that song. So when it was initially written, I was trying to think about, what lessons did my mother teach me about advancing and withdrawing and the art of war, really. And and many of these questions I've never been able to answer for myself. I was never able to quite interpret her interpretations, because what she would say wouldn't necessarily be her actions. And I was watching her very carefully.
Sorry.
You're as bad as I am.
Excuse me.
But I wish I had that clarion type voice that I usually have when I do interviews, but this is just the way it is, sorry.
It's working.
And so I was trying to make the best of what she was the signals, both verbal and nonverbal, that she was giving me about how to deal with boys. And so when I recorded it this time around, I was thinking about, there goes Molly, and now you can see my lovely skirt. Stay, lie down. And so I'm sure that Sally has the same difficulty in being able to interpret the signals that I give to her, because I'll say, I really am a prude. But then I won't necessarily dress like a prude or act like a prude in certain situations. And so it's confusing. And that's the way I've always heard it should be, is the same situation. Originally that song was written as how am I supposed to figure this thing out? Shall I get married? Shall I not get married? You say you want to move in together. It's time we raised a family. You say you want to marry me. We'll marry. And you can't imagine how many people called me to ask me to sing that at their weddings.
Excuse me. No, I got it.
I'm next.
Excuse me.
Which
You mentioned, while we're talking about voice stuff, your voice does sound, I'll let you sound great on this record. And just talk about your voice and keeping your voice up after all these years, and just that wonderful instrument you do have, and just what that's like for you to keep that instrument going.
Well, I find myself shooting up estrogen and testosterone. No, there's very little I can do, with the exception of vocal warm-ups. I would like to go to a vocal coach, but for the promotion of this record, it's too late. However, I have been doing my vocal exercises, and if I didn't have a cold right now, you would be able to hear the results of having done that. So even if you're not a student of the voice, and if you haven't been taking voice lessons since, for the last 5 years, preparing for American Idol, certain vocal warm-ups will certainly improve it, because your larynx is a muscle and your throat is a muscle, and there are lots of intrinsic muscles that that help you to deliver the note that you want to deliver. There's breath control too. There's diaphragmatic control. Diaphragmatic, don't you love that word? It's almost as good as prophylactic. And physicist assistant.
You can use one for the other. You've debunked the stage fright myths a long time ago. I know you said that's not what's been going on in your life, but now that you're about to go, this is a big week for you with lots of TV appearances and you have a big show. What's it like for you to put yourself out there? Is there what's the vibe in your head as you go out and do your thing? Because it's not something you do every day.
When you say I've debunked the myth?
Well, I've seen interviews with you where you talked about how you never really had stage fright and that was overblown.
Well, that's not true.
Okay.
I have stage fright. I have terrible stage fright, except that it's not, I wouldn't call it stage fright. I mean, on most lists of fears, the fear of public speaking is number one. Now, you could substitute the word singing for speaking. I mean, or being out, it's about being out there in front of an audience. And I'm sure whether the audience is 15,000 or 500, there's a similarity. I've always been better anyway on a one-to-one, in a one-to-one relationship. I'm better for instance, talking to you than I am if there was a whole room of you. And I know that I'm talking to you out there, and it's a large room, all the people who are watching this show, but I don't know it. So yes, I get out there in front of a lot of people, and I have that thing that is not so unusual to have, and I haven't been able to find a way around it. I can think that the whole audience is even more insecure than I am, if I focus on that, or I can think of the fact that I am strong enough to be able to carry this across, or that I'm good enough at what I'm doing, and that people are here because they want to hear me. I guess there's a little bit of a fear in my heart that some people are there specifically to hate me. Maybe just two of them.
Someone in the back.
But if you find even two of them, if you just latch onto one of their faces, I know that sometimes I've sung for audiences, and I can see in the front row or the second row a face that has a hard set expression of dislike on their faces, and I just look at them the whole time, and it's as if to say, "Come on, be with me. I need you for this. Come on. Can you smile a little bit?" And sometimes I've been actually known to actually not quite point a finger, but say, is there something that you'd like to tell me? Is there some other place you'd rather be? So it's I really, if there's a guy or a girl out there that is presenting me with an energy that is very negative, I will find it right away.
Mm-hmm. So message to the Carly fans: don't show up unless they're ready to have a good time. Yeah,
or get ready to have your opinion changed if a girl who's been a fan of mine for a while brings her husband and he says, I hate it whenever you put on a record. She's got to be willing to say, are you open-minded enough just to come with me, or would you rather stay home and I'll go by myself, or bring a friend or a dog?
But that's when the performance is done and you get the applause and you're walking off stage. Put towards that feeling for you as a performer. Are you questioning what just happened, or are you embracing that?
I'm very self-critical. I always think, oh my God, I was so out of tune on that song, or I was so, that wasn't in time, or did I throw you off? I'll say to one of the musicians, or, I'm worried about everybody on stage. I mean, more than I should be, because everybody is usually having a better time than I am. But I've been known to have really good times on stage too, so that's what I'm hoping for this particular round.
These songs that you're putting out again, they're so personal to you. The fans over the years have taken on their own appreciation for them, and they apply to their lives. What are those, when people come up to you on the street, or people over the years have come up to you, what kind of things do you hear, and what does that mean to you from people when they tell you a certain song got them through a certain period of their life or something like that?
Totally humbled. It makes me want to get to know that person, and why, and what was happening to them, and was it really similar to my experience, and let's talk about it. Let's sit down and have coffee. Unfortunately, I don't drink coffee. Unfortunately, I just don't have the time to talk to everybody that says that to me, but I'm so appreciative that people do come up to me and say those things. And when people come up to me and say that they've named their daughter after me, that is so, I want to break down and cry, which I do a lot. I am a crier. I'm a laugher and a crier. I'm a very openly, overtly emotional person, which sometimes is very good and sometimes is embarrassing. I never think that crying is bad, and when other people cry, I think, hallelujah, we're a range of emotions. We're not just one emotion. And I think having that range also gives me, makes me available to myself to be emotions. And songs are not about the law. They're about laws of nature maybe, but they're not intellectual beings necessarily. And if there is intellectual truth that comes out, that's fine, but songs to me are a very emotional experience.
You've mentioned obviously your family that you love working with. Is there someone else out there, if you can pick someone to collaborate with, another singer, maybe one of your contemporaries, someone new that you'd love to put on the next record, share a stage with. Is there a dream list for you you'd still love to work with?
Ludwig van Beethoven, preferably. And next, Raphael Saadiq. He approached me the other day through my boy Larry. I say my boy because he's another one of my boys. He's everything. He's the president of my record label. He is the person who calls me up in the morning and says, "You've got to do this. You've got to do that." He's my drummer. He's my son's manager and drummer, and he seems to be everything to everybody. But anyway, so Raphael Saadiq called him up and said that he'd like to produce my next record, which I just out of the blue. What an incredible offer, because I happen to love him as an artist. But there are so many people that I've had the good fortune to be able to collaborate with already, but that leaves about 99.9% of the rest of the people that I would like to also. And we don't have time on the show to even mention it. So Beethoven and Raphael.
And looking back, are there collaborators that mean the most to you at this point?
Michael McDonald writing "You Belong to Me," which is on this album, was an absolute thrill and also came as a complete surprise. And working with from David Sanborn to Michael Brecker, the great horn players that I've worked with, the great guitarists, David Spinoza and Jeff Mironoff, Jimmy Ryan, David Saw. It's just on and on. When if I start, Andreas Vollenweider, who's I don't know if you know who he is, but he's one of my great friends, and I've collaborated with him on a number of different things. I collaborated with him on the same, among the same albums, because I've done a lot of albums with him where I've been a guest star on his album, where he's been a guest star on mine. But I did a Christmas album which is also coming out very, very soon, called Christmas Is Almost Here, which has been put out every year, and this year it's including a new single called "The Night Before Christmas" on it, which has been kind of a hit the last 3 or 4 years as just it hasn't been on an album, but it is going to be able to be downloadable with this version of "The Night Before" of Christmas Is Almost Here, which was written by Livingston Taylor, which is a gorgeous song. And so Livingston is another person that I've been honored to be able to collaborate with. James Taylor is another obvious person. Cat Stevens, Chris Christopherson, Mick Jagger. Burt Bacharach is on the same album that Andreas is on Christmas Is Almost Here. He plays a version of White Christmas that I sing to, and you can hear his voice singing in the background. So those of you who can get that album do. It's called Christmas Is Almost Here, and it's on Rhino, which is a division of Warner Brothers. Mm-hmm. But don't get that without getting Never Been Gone, because Never Been Gone is the record.
Right. So after one enjoys Never Been Gone, you mentioned the possibility of maybe working with Raphael Saadiq, but in general, there's no stopping soon. You have a lot going on. There's no retirement going on.
As I said, I want to study music. I don't want to study voice. I want to study classical music in the sense that I want to study theory. I want to study instrumentation, orchestration. I have written an opera called Romulus Hunt, which hit the world by storm in 1991 or 2. It was. I know that scared you. It was presented by the Metropolitan Opera Guild and the Kennedy Center, and I'm so proud of that opera. It was definitely it was a rock opera, but it had but it was sung by all fantastic classical musicians, and there's now talk of doing mounting a television production of it for PBS. I'm just terribly proud of it. So I want to continue, that side of my, because I think harmonically. I'm actually a better harmony singer than I am a melody singer, and I can sing you a harmony to a song as I'm writing it. That's my nasty little secret. I'm a better harmony singer, and people have said that I'm a very good backup singer, and that would be very nice to. I would love to continue my life on stage as a backup support system, and while I'm writing great symphonies.
Mm-hmm. Something I wanted to ask you about, going back to your Sylvain, the Clouds in My Coffee line, because you have so much fun with that on this record, what you guys did with that and turned it into something kind of special and new. If you can just put into words what that line is about, what that means.
That was one of my stray lines. I was on an airplane flying to an Electra convention, and there was clearly, I had a cup of coffee, or I think it was coffee, maybe it was decaf, but there was a cloud from the airplane that was reflected in the top of the coffee cup. And my friend Billy Murnett, who was sitting right next to me, said, "Look, that looks just like a cloud. You've got clouds in your coffee." And so I quickly wrote that down. And that was one of my stray lines, clouds in my coffee. I wasn't sure what it really meant metaphorically, because it is a metaphor for whatever you think it's a metaphor for, and that's a personal, that's the listener's choice. Just as I had You're So Vain, You Probably Think This Song Is About You as a stray line for a long time. And I had You Walked Into the Party Like You Were Walking Onto a Yacht as a stray line. And there was no connecting those dots. And I had a melody that was called Bless You, Ben. This was years before my son Ben was born. And I just loved the name Ben. And those lyrics were Bless you, Ben, you walked in where nobody else left off. There I was all by myself, hiding up in my loft. Talking trouble, took my time, and singing some sad songs. I had some dreams, and then I added, they were clouds in my coffee, clouds in my coffee. So that was the original version of You're So Vain. And I knew for some reason it didn't work. It wasn't quite right. It was too esoteric. And then I was at the famous party where the gentleman walked in with the apricot scarf and went, whoosh, and I realized he walked into the party like he was walking onto a yacht, and then it all began to click, and then I saw You're So Vain, You Probably Think This Song Is About You. And that's how some of my songs are. And now, for instance, I have notebooks filled with stray lines, and I haven't had the time necessarily to put them together or to, really, just, it's very exciting. It's almost like, you're at a party and you pick out a fortune. I pick out a stray line and I say, yes, I know I've got something that I was thinking about at the same, at a different time, but it connects up with my psychology. I know it's gonna work there. So I think I'm gonna be writing lyrics or perhaps poetry. I mean, I've tried, even though poetry is it's a different animal. I know because I was married to a poet, Jim Hart, for 18 years. And I know he is a brilliant poet. He's probably the most brilliant poet I've ever, including Eliot and Yeats and Joyce, and he is Irish, so he has that great Irish sensibility for words. And he can't really write a lyric. And when I said, well, how do you write a poem? And he actually says that he goes into a zone, that there's a little poetry path. There's a poetry zone. And I think songwriters are more, it's a little bit, when you write a lyric, you have to use more of the left side of your brain. It's not, I think when I write melodies, it's pretty much all the right-hand side of my brain. But when I write lyrics, it's got to cross over.
Lastly, I wanted to get, you've been making news this week with the Starbucks thing. If you can just talk about it any way you're willing to talk about it. And there's legal things involved, so I'm not sure how much you can say, but just what's taking place, and just hear it from you personally, what's going on with.
Yes, I had a very unfortunate experience having chosen Starbucks as the record company that I wanted to have my last album called This Kind of Love, which is a wonderful album, I think, released on because of its marketing possibilities. Think of all the Starbucks around the world, and to have all those stores carry my album and to display it and to play it on their sound systems, and then to have Starbucks pull out of their record division 4 days before my record came out. That's just a breach of contract, straightforward. And even though the contract said StarCon on it, and they shifted me over to Concord, who didn't know anything about my record, didn't know any of the songs on my record, it was Starbucks that made it impossible for StarCon to carry out its responsibilities with the marketing of my album. And so they're not telling me about it and letting me go out and do all of the television shows and promote this album that was not available. And where it was available very, very wanly. You know, it wasn't like, wow, this is Carly Simon's great new album, This Kind of Love. It was like, oh yeah, well maybe we have a couple of copies in the back.
So where does that leave you now?
So I was sick of being the victim. And I thought, this is a clear case of something wrong has been done to me. And I'm not gonna take it anymore. The final nail I felt had been nailed into my coffin, and I was pushing against it and resisting it all the way. And I got myself the best lawyer in the country, David Boies, and he said, "You're absolutely right. You've got a case, and I'm going to fight it for you."
Very good, very good. On the good side of your music being out there, though, everywhere, this one reminded me of something. My parents called me last night from LA, and I think they were in IHOP, and they heard one of your songs. And if they're driving, they're playing Every Time We Say Goodbye, which is their favorite.
Oh, that's on Film Noir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that record.
That was with your son as well at the end of that song?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. That was on the radio?
No, that's in there. That was in their CD.
Oh, that was in their CD player. Oh yeah,
I can't
no.
stop listening to that.
I think that's a great song. That was 1997. How about another year? I remember that year.
But having your music out there, anyways, I don't know how that all works in terms of royalties and presence and catalog and all that.
Well, every time you issue a new record, it excites your entire catalog, and people say, "Oh yes, I forgot to get that record of hers, and let's see if it's available." And I think iTunes pretty much has everything, and you can probably buy it right from iTunes or from Amazon, or you go to carlysimon.com, and you can get just about everything you want. carlysimon.com.
There you go. And actually, with the title of this album being Never Been Gone, obviously that has a dual meaning. That obviously it's not a new song, but I've been calling the album Never Been Gone. We just talk about the meaning of that as well. So we have a couple little fan questions and we're done.
Okay. Never Been Gone was written about coming back to Martha's Vineyard after I had been off the island and probably gone through some sort of bad experience or enough of a bad experience to know that coming back to the island offered me such solace. And there's that line, and I didn't write the lyric to this one. My best friend Jake Brackman wrote the lyric to it. And there's that wonderful line that goes, the beginning of the second verse: "Seagulls cry and the hills are green and my friends are waiting for me. Great ambition is all a dream. Let me drown my pride in the sea." And that to me is just, it's one of the lines that, I write most of my lyrics myself, and boy, that's one that I can't take credit for, and I so wish I could, because I think it's just so much, let me drown my pride in the sea. I don't want to know about my ego anymore. I just, I've had enough of that. I didn't have such a great relationship with my ego. Let it drown in the sea. And so Never Been Gone is, also has the double meaning that now that I, Carly, have never been gone, even when your fans say, "Oh, are you still singing?" And I say, well, I've never really stopped. I mean, there have been times that I've been more visible than other times, but I am a musician. I'm, as Livingston says, I'm one of the circus people. And if I wasn't a musician, if I wasn't an artist, I don't know what I'd do, because I did have a 9-to-5 job once, and it was a riot. It was a riot how bad I was at it.
It was?
Oh yeah, I was really bad.
What was the job?
I was working for a television production company called Canaan Productions, and I used to take care of artists. I would go around to their dressing rooms when they were on these TV shows. There was this one show called From the Bitter End, and so I was the person that went around and said, "Can I get you some tea to Marvin Gaye?" And Gladys Knight and the Pips and Red Fox, I remember, was the comedian guest once. I wasn't bad at that. I was just bad at the shorthand and the typing. I couldn't really type fast enough for my boss to, he was always complaining about me. And then finally he put me on the show once as a singer with my sister Lucy when we were the Simon Sisters. My sister Lucy, I want to mention, is the greatest composer. She's such a fantastic composer, and she's just written a new musical, Dr. Zhivago, as if the book never existed. But she's the composer for that, and it's going to come out in Australia in late 2010. It's going to have its debut, but it's going to come to Broadway too, and I'm just very excited about that because it's a definite now.
Great. To conclude, we have some questions from your fans that we solicited.
Yeah, let me just take another sip.
You guys want any water or anything? You okay?
You're okay? Bag's okay?
Yeah, just
Great.
kind of.
Fluff it?
Well, no, just the front part. Just get it out of your eyes.
Okay?
You gotta fix the back.
Where?
Right
There you go.
Right there, you got it. Good, good.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you can answer these ones into camera, if you don't
Okay.
mind. And, okay. This is to Mary. Carly, is there someone who reminds you of a younger you when you were just starting? I guess a performer. Is there anyone out there? You can tell Mary if there's anyone like that.
Is there a younger me? Well, I was thinking of that wonderful country singer Brooke, who was on American Idol. Brooke, what was her last name? The girl that sang "You're So Vain."
Oh.
And anyway, I've got to remember her name. I can't say this without knowing her last name. Brooke. First name Brooke White. Is it Brooke White? I think it's Brooke White.
Blonde?
Yeah.
I think so.
Unfortunately, she was eliminated before the very
We'll
end.
come back to that one.
Yeah.
All right. This is similar but different. Brian in Toronto. We touched on this anyways, but maybe you can give him a short answer. What do you think of the new crop of pop singers, and whose music do you like? Brian.
I really have to think about that. I think that the new crop of pop singers are, as I said before, I think that some of them are overtrained so that you can't tell one from the other. And what is wonderful about the human voice is that it does have these little rocky and distinguishable pebbles on the beach. So I was going to say, don't smooth it out too much. Don't get too away from yourself. And one singer that I happen to love is Ben Harper. Everyone's a Ben who I love, but Ben Harper, I know and I believe and I feel that he's very true to himself and true to his personality, and his voice speaks the words that are very, very, very dear to him. So I'll just mention Ben. Of course, Ben Taylor.
It was Brooke White.
Brooke White, yeah. So, do
So
you want
is,
to go
is,
back
there,
to
is there a
that?
singer that reminds yourself of you? You can
Okay.
let Mary know.
Mary, I just want to say that I was so touched by Brooke White's version of "You're So Vain" that she performed on American Idol, and she did it so much better than I will ever do it. That it just it made me think, my God, I would just love to have a record of her doing that, and I think she's a fantastic singer, and maybe she got eliminated just before the end, and maybe it's because she didn't have that all American Idol sound. I really don't know, and I don't want to I think that show has done so much for music and so much for singers and so much for well, obviously entertainment, but I do feel that that when I think of who reminds me of myself as a singer coming up, I would say her first.
Very good. Two more, and then we're wrapping up. Stephanie says, I know your sister had a relationship with Walter Cronkite. Did you have a chance to have a relationship with Walter, meet him, and spend time with Walter?
Yes, my sister Joanna had a 4-year relationship with Walter Cronkite, and we spent many days and nights together. We sailed together. I was lucky enough to have a lot of conversations with him before he sort of went downhill and was not as clear, which was fortunately a very short period, maybe 6 months before he finally passed away. Yes, he was just as you see him on camera, as he was the Walter that was. He never skipped a beat. He never tried to be anybody that he wasn't. And when his reputation came out that he was the most trusted man in America, there's something about that where he just didn't try to be anybody but Walter Cronkite. He didn't pretend to be smarter than he was in areas that he didn't feel smart in. He just didn't pretend. There was no pretense. He was a wonderful man.
Very nice. And the last one, and we touched on this, you could just brush this off in a cute way, any cute way you want, but Nancy from Cleveland wants to know, what is the song You're So Vain? Who was it about?
Who is the song You're So Vain about? It's about all too many men